Hello everyone, we're here to show you the findings of our research on geopolitical shocks and firms' carbon emissions. Let's dive deep into it. Every major geopolitical shock reshapes the world economy, but how exactly does it reshape the companies operating within it? And more specifically, does it change how much carbon they emit? In this study, we investigate the link between environmental footprints of companies and geopolitical disruption through one key question. Did firms with pre-existing commercial ties to Russia and Ukraine change their greenhouse gas emissions differently from firms without such exposure after the invasion of February 2022? But why did we decide to research this topic? And which gaps does our paper fill regarding the existing literature? The reasons are twofold. First, most of the existing literature on geopolitical risk and corporate sustainability, which is still in its embryonal phase, focuses on ESG scores, composite ratings that bundle together a company's environmental, social, and governance practices. These scores are useful, but they're noisy. They can reflect reputation management as much as real operational change. Our study goes further, looking at both Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions, numbers that directly tell us what the firm did, not what they reported or signaled. Second, while researchers have studied how the Ukraine war affected firms' financial performance, investment decision, and supply chain behavior, its environmental consequences at the firm level have remained largely unexplored. This paper aims to fill this gap. To answer this question, we assembled a global panel of nearly 18,000 publicly listed firms from 104 countries, tracked annually from 2018 to 2025, covering both pre- and post-war periods. Our identification strategy relies on the difference in difference model, a method that compares how outcomes evolve over time after an exogenous shock for a treated group and a control group. Here, the treated group consists of firms that had revenues coming from Russia or Ukraine markets before the war in 2022, while the control group had none. To ensure that results aren't driven by broader economic forces, such as the global energy price shock, industry-wide downturns, or the evolving company size, we ran 3 models with different specifications, adding fixed effects meant to neutralize those effects. For direct Scope 1 emissions, the result is clear. Firms with pre-war ties to Russia or Ukraine reduced their emissions by roughly 5% more than comparable unexposed firms after the invasion. That gap survives even when we control for all the other factors. So it's not simply a story of European austerity or sectoral contraction. It's firm-specific. According to our view, there are 2 main interpretations to the results we obtained. First, Scope 1 reduction is linked to operational disengagement. The peculiar timing is interesting. There's almost no effect in 2022 itself. The gap opens in 2023 and keeps widening through 2024 and 2025. That lag makes sense. Firms announce that quickly, but actually shutting down a factory, unwinding contracts, and dissolving local subsidiaries takes years. Emissions fell when the operation stopped, not when the decision was made. However, there is a second interpretation of the result, which accounts for the specific difference in difference model, including the revenues variable. Since revenues remain stable or increase throughout the years, an increase in direct emissions should be expected. Instead, also in this case, the results confirm that the companies reduced their emissions by about 5%, reflecting possible efficiency improvements or investments to reduce emissions. For indirect emissions, Scope 2, the story is messier. The numbers point to a slight increase among exposed firms, but we cannot pin that on the war, because those same firms were already diverging from the control group before the invasion began. So it's reported for transparency, but not treated as a causal finding. What this paper ultimately shows is that geopolitical risk can function as a decarbonization mechanism. Whether these reductions are durable, whether they translate into structurally cleaner supply chains and energy models, or simply reflect a temporary contraction, is a question we flag as a priority for future research. But the implications of our study carry already meaningful impact to a wide range of audiences. Specifically, to corporate managers, who should consolidate shock-induced emissions reductions, and to investors and policymakers, who should look at geopolitical exposure not only as financial risk, but also to something deeply tied to environmental impacts.